Another lie. And by the way, Meghan, if you don't like me calling you a liar, just sue me and we'll go through all this in court.
Few royal controversies have generated as much speculation as the questions that continue to surround Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the birth of their children. For years, online commentators had debated everything from palace procedures to succession rules, often pointing to small details that they believe deserve closer examination. While many of the most dramatic allegations remain completely unverified, the persistence of the debate has raised a larger question. Why do rumors surrounding Archie and Lilibet continue resurfacing years after the original events took place? In the modern media era, royal controversies rarely disappear completely. Even after official statements are released, public appearances are made, and years pass without new developments, certain stories continue resurfacing because they touch on issues that extend far beyond the individuals involved. According to many royal commentators, the ongoing debate surrounding Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, Archie, and Lilibet falls directly into that category. The reason is not simply because people remain interested in the Sussex family. The reason is because the discussion intersects with questions about royal succession, constitutional traditions, transparency, and the future credibility of one of the world's oldest institutions. At the center of the debate is a principle that has existed within the British monarchy for centuries: the line of succession. For generations, the monarchy has relied upon clearly established rules governing inheritance, titles, and the transfer of constitutional responsibilities. While those rules have evolved over time, the importance of legitimacy within the royal line has remained a subject of enormous significance. As a result, whenever questions emerge regarding births, succession, or royal procedures, public interest tends to increase rapidly. That is exactly what happened in the years following Archie's birth. According to various commentators, several unusual details surrounding the announcement of Archie's arrival generated curiosity almost immediately. Some observers pointed to differences between previous royal birth announcements and the way information was communicated in this case. Others focused on timelines, public statements, and procedural changes that they believed departed from traditional royal practices. It is important to emphasize that curiosity and proof are not the same thing. Many of the claims circulating online have never been supported by publicly verified evidence. Nevertheless, the existence of unanswered questions was enough to keep the discussion alive amongst certain groups of royal watchers. One of the most frequently discussed topics involves the birth announcement itself. Historically, royal births have often been accompanied by highly visible public procedures designed to reassure the public and maintain confidence in the line of succession. Over the decades, these traditions became familiar symbols of transparency and continuity. When Archie was born, however, some commentators argue that the process appeared different from what many people expected based on previous royal births. Supporters of the Sussexes countered that modern royal life should not be required to follow every historical tradition simply because it existed in the past. They argued that Harry and Meghan were entitled to greater privacy and should not be judged against procedures developed during very different eras. Critics disagreed. They argued that royal privilege and public accountability have always been linked, particularly when matters of succession are involved. That disagreement became one of the driving forces behind the entire controversy. Meanwhile, another factor contributed significantly to public curiosity: Prince Harry's own descriptions of events. Over the years, statements made during interviews, documentaries, and especially Harry's memoir have been examined extensively by commentators looking for inconsistencies or unusual details. Supporters generally dismiss these observations as harmless mistakes or misunderstandings that naturally occur when people recount emotional events years later. Others are less convinced. They argue that small inconsistencies become more significant when viewed alongside broader questions surrounding royal procedures and timelines. Whether those interpretations are fair remains highly disputed. What cannot be disputed, however, is the effect they had on public conversation. Every new detail fueled additional speculation. Every explanation generated new questions. And every question encouraged commentators to dig deeper. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the story is that it gradually evolved beyond Meghan Markle herself. What began as discussion about one royal birth eventually expanded into a much larger debate about institutional trust. Can modern monarchies, maintain traditional constitutional requirements while also respecting personal privacy? How much transparency should the public expect from senior royals? And when historical procedures change, does the palace have a responsibility to explain why? These questions became increasingly important because they extended far beyond Harry and Meghan. They touched the monarchy itself, and according to many royal analysts, that is precisely why the controversy never fully disappeared. The debate was no longer just about a birth announcement, a timeline, or a procedural detail. It had become a broader discussion about trust, succession, and whether the palace's handling of a situation unintentionally created the very speculation it hoped to avoid. As those questions continued circulating, attention gradually shifted toward another issue entirely. Because according to commentators, the real explosion of controversy did not come from the birth announcement alone. It came when observers began examining timelines, public statements, and details from Harry's own accounts of the events surrounding Archie's arrival, and that is where the debate became significantly more intense. According to many royal commentators, the controversy surrounding Archie's birth began attracting significantly more attention when online observers started examining timelines discussed in interviews, media appearances, and later in Prince Harry's memoir. While supporters of the Sussexes argued that minor inconsistencies are perfectly normal when people recount emotional experiences years after they occur, critics claimed that several details appeared unusual enough to justify further discussion. It was this clash between competing interpretations that transformed a relatively small debate into one of the most persistent controversies surrounding Harry and Meghan since their departure from royal duties. One of the most frequently discussed points involved Harry's description of the day Archie was born. According to commentators, some readers questioned whether the sequence of events described in various accounts aligned perfectly with standard medical expectations and established royal procedures. Supporters immediately dismissed these concerns, arguing that childbirth experiences differ dramatically from one family to another and that attempting to construct conspiracy theories from isolated details was both unfair and irresponsible. Nevertheless, the discussion continued spreading because the questions touched upon issues that many royal watchers considered important. At the same time, attention began shifting toward the palace's communication strategy. Historically, royal births have often been accompanied by carefully coordinated announcements designed to minimize confusion and provide clarity to the public. However, some commentators noted that the communication surrounding Archie's birth appeared different from previous royal examples. Questions emerged regarding the timing of announcements, the release of information, and the decision to prioritize privacy over certain traditional procedures. Again, none of these observations constituted proof of wrongdoing. Yet they contributed to a growing perception among some observers that aspects of a story remained unexplained. This is where the debate became significantly more complicated. For supporters of Harry and Meghan, the answer seemed obvious. The couple had repeatedly expressed their desire for greater privacy and a more modern approach to royal life. From this perspective, procedural differences were not evidence of deception, but evidence of changing priorities. They argued that Harry and Meghan should not be expected to replicate every royal tradition simply because previous generations had followed them. Critics, however, viewed the matter differently. They argue that royal births are not purely private family events because they intersect with constitutional issues, titles, and the line of succession. In their view, greater privacy inevitably creates greater scrutiny when questions begin emerging. Whether that criticism is fair remains a subject of intense debate, but it explains why the controversy continued attracting attention long after the original events occurred. As discussions intensified, social media amplified every detail. Small inconsistencies became major talking points. Minor procedural differences became evidence for competing narratives. And every new interpretation encouraged audiences to revisit older interviews, photographs, and public statements in search of additional clues. According to many analysts, this phenomenon illustrates how modern royal controversies evolve. What begins as a simple question gradually expands into a larger debate about transparency, institutional trust, and public expectations. By this stage, the discussion was no longer solely about Archie's birth. It had become a broader conversation about how the monarchy balances privacy with accountability and whether unanswered questions inevitably create opportunities for speculation. As the debate continued growing, attention increasingly shifted toward King Charles and the wider institution, with commentators asking whether palace silence had unintentionally allowed the controversy to become much larger than it might otherwise have been. According to many royal commentators, the debate entered its most significant phase when attention began shifting away from individual timelines and procedural questions and toward the monarchy itself. Up until this point, discussions had largely focused on Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, Archie's birth announcement, and the various claims circulating online. However, as the controversy continued generating attention, observers increasingly started asking a different question. If questions surrounding royal births, succession procedures, and transparency could remain active for years without being fully resolved in the public mind, what did that mean for the institution's long-term credibility? That question, according to many analysts, transformed the story from a Sussex controversy into a broader debate about the future of the monarchy. At the center of this growing discussion stood King Charles. Although many of the events being debated occurred before he became monarch, commentators frequently argued that the controversy now represented a challenge for his reign because it touched on public confidence in royal institutions. Modern monarchies do not operate solely through constitutional authority. They also depend heavily on public trust. When trust is strong, institutions tend to weather controversy more effectively. When trust begins to weaken, even relatively minor questions can generate disproportionate levels of scrutiny. This reality has become increasingly important in the digital age. Unlike previous generations, where official statements often ended public debates, modern audiences have access to endless streams of information, commentary, reaction videos, social media discussions, and competing interpretations. As a result, controversies rarely disappear completely. Instead, they evolve, adapt, and resurface whenever new interviews, books, documentaries, or public appearances provide fresh material for analysis. Many royal observers believe that this dynamic played a major role in keeping the Archie controversy alive. Every new statement generated new interpretations. Every clarification generated additional questions. And every attempt to move beyond the debate seemed to encourage some commentators to revisit it once again. Meanwhile, another issue began attracting increasing attention: succession. Historically, questions involving the line of succession have always received heightened scrutiny because they affect the long-term stability of the institution itself. Supporters of Harry and Meghan argue that the rules surrounding succession have been fully satisfied and that the continued speculation serves no constructive purpose. Critics counter that public confidence depends not only on compliance with rules, but also on the public's understanding of how those rules were applied. That distinction may seem subtle, but according to many commentators, it explains why the controversy continues generating debate. The discussion is no longer solely about Archie. It is about transparency. It is about communication. And it is about whether modern royal institutions should adapt their traditional practices to meet changing public expectations. At the same time, Prince William and Catherine have increasingly become part of the conversation. As the future king and queen, they are often viewed as symbols of the monarchy's next chapter. Consequently, whenever debates emerge about public trust, institutional credibility, or royal accountability, commentators frequently ask what lessons future generations of royal leadership might learn from past controversies. For many analysts, that question is where the story becomes most interesting. Because regardless of whether one supports Harry and Meghan or agrees with their critics, the controversy ultimately reveals how difficult it has become for public institutions to maintain credibility in an era defined by constant scrutiny and instant communication. And according to many royal watchers, that growing pressure is exactly what set the stage for the next phase of the debate, as increasingly dramatic claims involving doctors, medical information, and alleged new revelations began appearing online, pushing the controversy into even more explosive territory than before. According to many royal commentators, the controversy reached an entirely different level once increasingly dramatic claims involving doctors, medical records, and supposed insider revelations began appearing online. Up until that point, most of the debate had focused on timelines, public statements, royal procedures, and questions about transparency. However, as often happens with long-running royal controversies, some commentators began searching for what they believed would be definitive proof capable of resolving the debate once and for all. That search for a smoking gun ultimately produced some of the most explosive allegations associated with the entire story, despite the fact that many of those claims remain completely unverified and highly disputed. According to reports circulating across social media and various royal discussion platforms, anonymous sources allegedly claimed that medical professionals possessed information that could supposedly answer lingering questions about Archie's birth. These stories rapidly attracted attention because they appeared to offer something previous theories lacked: direct involvement from individuals connected to the medical process itself. Supporters of the allegations argued that such claims deserved investigation. Critics responded that extraordinary accusations require extraordinary evidence, and that anonymous medical claims without documentation should be treated with extreme skepticism. This disagreement quickly became the central battleground of the debate. On one side were commentators who believed palace transparency had been insufficient from the beginning and therefore viewed new allegations as potentially significant. On the other side were those who argued that years of speculation had produced no verifiable evidence and that each new claim simply recycled the same underlying theories in different forms. What made the situation even more complicated was the nature of medical privacy itself. In most countries, patient information is protected by strict legal and ethical standards. As a result, any claim involving private medical records immediately raises questions about credibility, legality, and verification. Many analysts pointed out that if genuine evidence existed, it would need to withstand intense scrutiny from journalists, legal experts, and independent investigators. Without that level of verification, rumors remain rumors regardless of how dramatic they appear. Yet despite these concerns, the story continued spreading. The reason, according to many observers, is that the controversy had evolved beyond the specific allegations. It had become a symbol of a larger conflict between transparency and privacy. Supporters of Harry and Meghan argued that private medical matters should remain exactly that, private. Critics countered that public confidence in royal succession depends on sufficient transparency to prevent confusion and speculation. King Charles increasingly became part of the conversation as well. Although there has been no public evidence supporting claims that the king ordered legal action or investigations of the kind described in some online narratives, commentators frequently discussed what the monarchy should do when controversies refused to disappear. Some argued that continued silence allowed speculation to flourish. Others believed that responding directly would only legitimize unfounded theories and encourage future rumors. This dilemma placed the institution in a difficult position. Every response risked generating new questions. Every silence risked generating new theories. And every new allegation attracted another wave of public attention. Meanwhile, Prince William and Catherine continued appearing in discussions about the monarchy's future. Many commentators suggested that future royal leaders may eventually face similar challenges, where public expectations for transparency collide with legitimate desires for privacy. In that sense, the controversy became less about the Sussexes themselves and more about how modern monarchies navigate the realities of the digital age. According to many royal analysts, that is precisely why the debate continued evolving long after the original events took place. It was no longer merely a discussion about births, timelines, or medical claims. Instead, it had become a broader argument about trust, institutional credibility, and the standards the public expects from royal families in the 21st century. And as increasingly sensational allegations continued appearing online, attention gradually shifted toward the final question at the center of the entire controversy. What impact, if any, would these persistent rumors have on the future reputation of the monarchy itself? As the debate surrounding these claims continued evolving, many royal commentators eventually arrived at a conclusion that was very different from the dramatic headlines that first fueled the controversy. The story was no longer simply about Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, Archie, or even the specific allegations being discussed online. Instead, it had become a larger conversation about trust, transparency, and the challenges facing modern royal institutions in an era where every public statement is examined, every timeline is scrutinized, and every unanswered question can generate years of speculation. According to many observers, that broader discussion may ultimately be more significant than any individual rumor itself. One of the most interesting aspects of the controversy is how it has survived despite the absence of publicly verified evidence supporting many of its most dramatic claims. Normally, stories fade when no new information emerges. Yet this debate continued resurfacing because it touched on issues that extend far beyond one family. Questions about succession, constitutional procedures, public accountability, and institutional credibility have always attracted attention, particularly when they involve one of the most famous royal families in the world. For supporters of Harry and Meghan, the situation represents something relatively straightforward. They argue that the couple made decisions designed to protect their privacy during an intensely personal period of their lives, and that years of speculation have unfairly transformed private family matters into public controversies. From this perspective, the continued circulation of rumors says more about modern media culture than it does about the Sussexes themselves. Critics view the situation differently. They argue that members of the royal family occupy unique constitutional positions that inevitably create higher expectations regarding transparency and public confidence. In their view, procedural questions surrounding succession and royal births naturally invite scrutiny, particularly when traditional practices appear to change. This disagreement remains at the heart of the entire controversy, and according to many analysts, it explains why neither side has been able to fully persuade the other. Meanwhile, King Charles has increasingly become part of the broader conversation, not because of any verified legal action or dramatic intervention, but because he now serves as the monarch responsible for maintaining confidence in the institution. Many commentators have noted that one of the greatest challenges facing modern monarchies is balancing privacy with public accountability. Reveal too much, and family members lose personal autonomy. Reveal too little, and speculation fills the gaps. That balancing act is becoming increasingly difficult, particularly in an age where social media ensures that every rumor can travel across the world in a matter of minutes. At the same time, attention has increasingly shifted toward Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. As the future king and queen, they are often viewed as representatives of the monarchy's next chapter. Every controversy involving public trust, communication, or transparency naturally raises questions about how future royal leaders might handle similar situations. Many commentators believe this may ultimately be one of the most important lessons emerging from the entire debate. Not whether the allegations are true, not whether the rumors are false, but how institutions respond when uncertainty becomes a story in its own right. Because according to many royal observers, that is exactly what happened here. The controversy gradually evolved beyond its original claims and became a case study in modern public perception. Every silence created theories. Every explanation created counterarguments. Every attempt to move forward encouraged someone else to revisit the past. And perhaps that reality explains why the story continues generating discussion years after the original events occurred. The most dramatic allegations remain disputed. The strongest claims remain unverified. The debates remain unresolved. Yet public fascination continues because the controversy touches on something deeper than any individual rumor. Trust. Trust in institutions. Trust in public figures. And trust in the information people choose to believe. According to many commentators, that may ultimately be the true legacy of this entire controversy. Not a legal battle, not an arrest, not a shocking revelation, but an ongoing debate about transparency, credibility, and how modern monarchies navigate a world where public curiosity never truly disappears. What do you think about this long-running royal controversy? Do you believe the continued debate reflects legitimate questions about transparency and public accountability? Or do you think years of speculation have caused people to read too much into events that should have remained private? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this remains one of the most discussed and controversial topics among royal watchers around the world. If you enjoyed today's analysis, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest coverage of Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, King Charles, Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the stories shaping the future of the British monarchy. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.